Alright, I'm testing this out. I'm going to be upgrading this Glarry guitar that I got. It was the second edition of their little Strat copy. I already put roller saddles on it. The same tuners it came with. This one has a bone nut, which was better than the original. Dirty maple neck, and it's got Wilkinson branded pickups, but they're staggered pole. They're okay pickups. They're not great, but they're not terrible. And a pretty cheap bridge. If you look in there, you can see very thin, not very much sustain, not a very big block. So I'm getting ready to upgrade this guitar. The only upgrade that's been done is the roller string trees, roller trees. So I'm going to put a new bridge on it and a new neck. And the neck I'm getting looks like a Fender neck. It's just made to look like a Fender neck. And it'll be the first one of those kind of fake Fender necks I've ever gotten. And this neck's good. It's okay, but I noticed that it got kind of dirty when I did the fretwork on it. Some of the dust and stuff from the work got down in the grains, and I've never really seen it permeate a neck as much as this one. So it's dirty, so I'm going to clean it up, and I'm going to put a new nut on it. I think I cut the nut a little too low on one of the strings. But it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. Actually, my cheaper original Strat copy from Glarry was way, way, way better. It's one of my favorite guitars, but I think this one with a better bridge is just going to be great. So I got this new bridge. This is a Wilkinson. You can kind of see the Wilkinson branding. There it is. It's kind of like this. See the Wilkinson branding on there, and it's got a really fat block. This really helps with sustain. I like the bent steel saddles. Some people think these are bad. I love them. It's got the black hardware, which I think is cute. And it came with extra black riser pin things. I guess in case you wear these out, you can swap those out. Came with a Music Lily pick, which is where I got it from, was Music Lily. It is a push-pull whammy bar there for the tremolo, wiggle stick, whatever you want to call it. I like calling them whammy bars. Some people call them trem bars because they snap into the tremolo. So you got this kind of plastic piece here, and then it just plugs right in there, and then you've got a place to tighten right here with your hex wrench. And they don't rattle. This won't rattle like a screw-in trem bar. Came with springs, screws, a claw screw, new claw, and I'm probably going to use all this stuff. I'm not going to keep any of the original hardware that's in this in the back or on the top, and I'll put this bridge back for, you know, whatever, like maybe if me and my son want to make a project guitar for fun, we'll throw this cheap bridge on there just for fun. But I think these pickups are going to be good with a better bridge, with a better neck. I think the whole guitar is going to be drastically better. Alright, so this is going to be part of a little series I'm doing, working on guitars, called In Bed with Guitars. I'm actually sitting on my bed, which is where I do the work on my guitars. I use an old white t-shirt to sit on the bed. I have all my tools over here, off to the side, like in this area back here. I got my toolbox and stuff. So I called these roller saddles earlier. I called them the correct term later though, but they're string trees. These are roller trees. They're like some of the newer Fender ones, where they create less friction on the edges of the strings, and I like them. I like them better. So I'm going to go ahead and take the tension off these strings. And I'm going to take the strings off and then go ahead and get this bridge on. These strings could probably use being changed. Sometimes I'll use strings over and over and over again though. Don't think just because you're doing work on your guitar you have to change the strings out. That's really not true. If the strings still sound good, they're not dead, or you like that particular set of strings, you can work around it. Sometimes I've seen lots of guys work on guitars and they just kind of fold the strings back and then just do all the work over again, and then they'll go ahead and put the strings right back on. Now of course sometimes unwinding the strings can weaken the little edge here when you put the string back in, and so you might end up with a broken piece on the end of the string. So that could get in the way if you want to keep using it. But there's nothing wrong with using strings until you're done with them. Of course, if they get dead, I wouldn't keep using them. Okay, so that's all those strings ready to go there. So I've got my strings here, and if I'm gonna, suppose I'm not taking the bridge off, I'm just doing neck work, or maybe level crown polish, which I've already done on these. Suppose you're just doing neck work or changing the nut or changing the tune or something, and you know, hey, these strings are too new, I'm not going to waste these strings. You can just kind of pull them up and set something on them. Like I have them kind of bunched up here, as you can see there, kind of bunched up, and I can just set them down here behind the guitar. I can take this tool here and just set it right over the strings to add some weight to the whole little group of them. And as you can see, they're stuck here. And so if I was just doing that work, then these would stay there. And then when I'm done, I can lot them back out and take them over. You might put a twisty tie around them or something like that to make that work. You do not have to put brand new strings on a guitar every single time you work on it. That's kind of it's actually very wasteful. And people, a lot of YouTubers are going to talk about their string, and I've noticed that a lot of times the YouTubers will all talk about the same pedal at the same time. A lot of them will talk about not to play a certain way when you may play that way. A lot of them will talk about a newer thing that just came out, and a lot of them will say, "Oh, you've been using the wrong strings. Use these strings." And it's usually Ernie Ball or something like that. Well, I played for a very long time, and I found the strings that I like the best, and so those are the strings that I use. So again, you don't have to buy $15 a pack strings, and you don't have to change your strings every single time you take them off. In this particular case, I'm probably going to go ahead and change these strings out just because I'm taking the neck off, I'm putting a new bridge on it, and I'm just going to have that nice, clean, new thing going on for it. So sometimes you can pop these out the back here, and that's really what these little holes are for. If you look here on the back of your Strat, that's supposed to be so you can just easily pop the string up, and that worked right there. There's that one, and then that one worked. Sometimes though you'll get a finicky string, and putting the strings in there through these holes, and there we got a finicky one. See? And he doesn't want to pop through that hole, and you might get a needle nose plier or something, or a little edge of something to put in there to guide it back up through in case you want to just keep this on. So you're just swapping strings. You don't have to do anything about this. But for now, I'm not doing that. I'm actually going to be replacing the claw and the springs and all that crazy stuff in here. So I'm going to take this little pin my daughter got me. She said she thought it was just a nice pin. She didn't even know. This pin has a, is that some sailor school? It has a level inches centimeters to millimeters. Of course, it's a pen. It's a working pen, and a clip. And then this comes off. This is a stylus. So I guess I could use that if I don't use tablets or smartphones or anything like that. And it's a screwdriver. So this has a little Phillips head, and it's magnetized inside here. You can put the cap back on like that. And this is cheap. It's not like a high end or whatever, but it's just very easy for this kind of work. It's super. And I've got a pen if I need it. I've got a level. It's a small level, I guess, if I need it. So it helps to have little things like that, the multi-use. I heard a guy say that I have a lot of respect for, Jesse Bond, who does Bithead videos, Bithead 1000. Super, super funny. He doesn't like to be laughed at, I guess, because he's talking about his life, but he really just could be a comedian on how funny he is, his videos are. But he said, if you ever see a worker come to your house and pop out one of these, just kick them right out of your house. And I can't agree with that, because I've actually was given this by my wife's father, over 20 years ago, and I've used it constantly. I use this Leatherman PST2. I use it constantly for so many things. Like, it balances like that, so you can set something up on this. It has all this, super sharp knife. I just used this today to open packages because it's like a surgical sharpness knife. It has scissors. I guess, they would be for cutting leather, maybe. But these are really sharp, good scissors. A couple other things. I broke the punch off of it a long time ago, this punch here, but it's still kind of some of it on there. But the very tip of it broke off. It's got a screwdriver, it's got a bottle opener. Then it's actually got this file here. And I use this file. It's a fine edge, might be like diamond or something. It's a super, super fine edge. I use this for the edges of frets. So if you have a fret sprout, a little hanging, sharp little frets, and it's because the bottom of it is, see if I can get this on here right, the bottom of this is totally flat. So when you set this on the neck of a guitar, you know that this isn't going to cut anything at all. Only this part right here is going to make contact with anything. So I know if I get this down on the edge, first off it's angled, so I have that control. And if I push it onto the very edge of the fret, I have a lot of control over it. I can even bend it into the handle and have more control. I've used this to round and soften the ends of frets many times, and this is extremely good for that first work, and that's a lot of times, that's the only thing that your guitar is going to need. You'll get it, and it's going to need something. It's going to need the very edges of the little sharp parts of the frets because of whatever. Either it was the factory, not enough work put into it, or the temperature, or a little bit of both. You'll get fret sprout, or you'll get little hanging sharp frets, and that shouldn't make you not want to deal with the guitar, because it's going to happen. My advice, and I haven't really heard anybody say this, but I can tell you I've worked on about a little over 30 guitars now. I'm not, the most experienced guy at this, but I've also learned from many different luthiers, having frequented YouTube and all kinds of different channels, and I've heard so many different things. I've essentially, graduated from the, guitar work school of YouTube, surfing all these different YouTube videos and figuring out how to do things, to the point where I can give advice, and I'm very confident that the advice is good. And one piece of advice I can give somebody on working on guitars is, if you're going to work on your frets, do it in dry, cold climates, and when it's winter time, or in a cool, dry area, because that's when your neck wood is going to shrink up. And so when your neck has shrunk because it's cool and dry, and it's winter time or whatever, maybe a controlled environment, then your frets are going to pop out on the edges. They're going to have little sharp ends that pop out. If you do your fretwork then, when it's cool and dry, Then later on, when it's warm and humid and your neck soaks up water and expands, your frets will still be in there okay. And then later on, when it gets cool and dry again, your frets won't pop out any further. So, if you do all your neck work in the summertime when it's humid, when the wintertime comes along, don't be surprised if your frets are sharp on the ends again, or if you get fret sprout, you need to hit it with a hammer or whatever you do to deal with your frets. And I've learned that, and so I know it works. I do my fret work in the wintertime, and then in the summertime, and then in the next winter. As the guitar goes, I usually don't ever have any problems with sharp frets, anything popping out. So yeah, that's just a tiny bit of a suggestion based on the, working on a lot of guitars now. Now these are kind of cheap, and if you can see in here how extremely thin, and sometimes these break, because that's as thin as they can possibly get it. That is as thin of a little catch there for the stuff as they can possibly get it. And I've heard guys say, if you got 2 springs on there, then you got a middle one. This middle one's doing nothing. And, I kind of believe that. I'm looking through my stuff, and I might go in and start taking that out. You can see we've got some paint here that's come up from the cheap processing, stuff like that. So all the strings are off. The back is off. This is ready for a brand new bridge. All right. So yeah, I could probably leave this claw and these springs in here, and I don't know, how much of a big difference is, but these are probably better springs, because I've noticed that Wilkinson products, even though Wilkinson does have really cheap stuff out there, like I would say that the Wilkinson pickups in this guitar probably aren't like their, top of the line pickups. They were just to add some value to the already extremely inexpensive guitar that you're buying. But I'm using my Leatherman again, so yeah. But the Wilkinson springs are probably better. The Wilkinson claw is probably better. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and use my Leatherman again to take these off. Alright, so there's the 3, still good, but probably really cheap springs. There's this guy. There's the claw. I did that to loosen it up, but I am going to go ahead and remove the claw all the way. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and remove the screws and everything for this newer claw. This newer claw is much, much better. It looks wider. It's probably going to create more tension, so I'm going to actually have to solder. I'm going to have to solder the ground wire back on there, which is no big deal at all. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Alright, I went ahead and got the screws out, and look, I used my Leatherman again to set this up for soldering later. So I went ahead and used it to strip the end of this wire. And that's, I'm sure that's totally fine to use a Leatherman for that. Anyway. So I've got my bridge here. Now, I always make my bridges float a little above. But you have to make sure these are nice and loose to be able to do that, because if they're clamped down too much, you won't get that effect. And what it does is gives you up and down note instead of just down, which is what most. If your bridge is flat against the body, then the only action that you're going to be able to get is to lower notes using your trem bar. So if you want to be able to raise and lower notes, then you can kind of float your 6-screw or 2-point tremolo to subtly imitate a Floyd Rose or something more advanced. it's not as big of a change. You're not going to make like really super high note changes, but you really probably don't want to. And it's better than nothing. But some people say, oh, it's way too hard to tune your bridge if you do that. Okay, that's a reason not to. Or I just want to fix my bridge. Well, I honestly think that's ridiculous. If you are one of these people who puts a block in your spring bridge, your 6-screw or whatever, and so it cannot use the tremolo, well, honestly, all you'd really have to do is tighten the springs down or put a couple extra springs on it so it's really, really, really tight. And that's pretty much the same. And also, why do you have that bridge? I mean, you could effectively, yeah, you could block it off and it'd be like a hardtail, but you know, when you're choosing your instruments, if you're like, oh, well, I never use a trem bar, well, there are plenty of hardtails out there with your name on it, but why get a nice springy 6-screw or 2-point tremolo if you're never going to bend notes using the tremolo, using the whammy bar? I do. I like it. It's a lot of fun, and my son does, and he has a lot of fun bending notes and making it harmonic, kind of scream a little bit and stuff. And it's a neat little sound effect you have control over. And if your guitar never stays in tune, that's probably a saddle or nut issue or string tree issue. It's some kind of issue. Not likely is it really the springs. So this guy's off here now, and you can see that little thin, and this is lightweight. This weighs nothing. This weighs nothing. This top bar, it's bent. It doesn't look so horrible, but this is the part that's just gonna, excuse me, this is the part that's, these actually break sometimes. This one isn't, obviously, and it's a screw in. Your bar's going to screw in there, and I had this action nice and high, which means this neck's probably been shimmed. And so here's the new one. Go ahead and get some of the splits off there. Wouldn't you know, it lines up pretty good right there. I don't think that's bad. I don't know, actually it kind of looks a little bit crooked the way it is, and I think that's because this right here seems a tiny bit crooked. Let me see here. Yeah, that looks uneven. I don't know if it's supposed to be like that. Probably not. Hopefully I didn't buy a bad bridge or something. And that doesn't have much room for movement as it sits there. But I think as I'm looking at it, the other one did that a little bit too. So for that to be even, this is kind of up against that. And that might be more work than it is worth to try to get that right. As it's like that, it's almost even here. It's not really even. So we'll see. It might be that I need to take some of this back just a hair so that there's room for this to move slightly into this area. There's room under it on this top ply where that would be okay. So yeah, just playing around right now just to get an idea of what the next step is. But yeah, I can see now that doesn't line up, and this is really crooked right here. It lines up slightly, but to make it line up, this is pushed forward, and then this is up against this to the point where there's no room. So yeah, this will have to come back, I think, slightly, which is more work than I thought I'd have to do in this little project. I guess one thing I might try, if these are lined up properly, is to swap out the workings. I don't know though, because this is a lot thicker and heavier and nicer. But yeah, I guess I could unscrew this plate, take these saddles off, put this sustain kind of string block here on this one, actually they look pretty close, but I don't know if I really would want to do that. The reason I got this bridge is because I like this larger block. It's just heavier, it's better for your guitar. But if you look here, see that? It looks crooked, doesn't it? Now, I don't know if that's on purpose or why they would do that. I'm thinking in a factory, they're looking at this, oh, that's how we want it? Is that really how that's supposed to be? Now, I got a Fender one recently to upgrade a Mitchell guitar with. One of the pins on the Mitchell, it was a Wilkinson, really nice 2-point bridge. One of the pins on the top of it broke, and I looked for replacements and stuff, and they said, oh, you know what, I'm just going to put a 2-point Fender bridge on this Mitchell. And so I did, and it went on perfectly. It went on great, but I don't think this was crooked like that. I really don't. I don't think it was crooked to that degree. But it looks like all the string holes line up. It's weird. That's what it is. It's weird. So we'll check into this. All right, so I looked into it, and there was paint spillover on here on the inside towards the bottom on the back, and that's what was catching this so that it couldn't line up. As I pop it down in there, you can see it lines up a lot better now. And so yeah, that's going to be flexible. Alright, so we'll go ahead and try the Wilkinson screws that came in here. I'm going to do this one first, and then I'm going to do this one right here second. Now look at the difference in the claw spring screws. This was the cheaper claw spring screw, it's really light, and then this was the newer one, which is a thinner kind of spacing there on the whorls, but it's a longer, arguably higher quality. But yeah, so this is going to go in there. All right. So let's see if we can get this in here the way it's supposed to be. And ideally, I should probably use like a big soft-handled, like a better screwdriver, but I'm just using what I got laying right here for now. The holes are already there, so it's not like I need to really tough it out to get this down in there. Now when you do this, you go all the way down, but then you're going to want to back off a little bit so that this has room to lift up. If it doesn't have room to lift up, then you can't flex the springs to raise or lower notes. There's all the way down, and then a couple of turns off of it. And there we go. So it looks like it can flex there, maybe not. We'll see. Yep, I think it's catching on the back of the slot in there because it's so thin that this cannot flex. And then you can see inside here it's a tight fit, and then on the back of that there's essentially no room for flexation. So I'd have to cut more material out of the back of this to make this flex. Even though it fits in the front now, the back of it is kind of catching. So I'm going to have to do some nasty woodwork here. You can see the paint left over here from carving out that paint spillover. And so now that I know that, I can go ahead and take the bridge back out and get ready to remove some wood. Of course, I'm not 100% sure where I'm going to go with that. I might use a saw, but I don't think that's, I don't know about that. I could use a file, but it would take a lot of filing to get this where it's going to let it move. Alright, there's my 6 screws there ready to go. And as I can see in there, it's just, yep, it's just barely not enough. So close. And this, it fitted there pretty good. So it'll be here. And there, like I said, it's already thinner here. If you look in the body, you can see this lip of wood right here. And that is what's keeping it. Just the very edge is keeping it. So I don't have to take all that off, but taking probably a couple of millimeters or a little more than that off of that. And who knows what that's going to look like, because the edge of this is poking over. So as it sits, when this comes up, yeah, that edge there, it's probably not going to look great. Anyway, so I'm actually going to take some of this paint spillover off the inside of this. It's got quite a bit of paint spillover, and I'm using the thicker file that came with the Leatherman PST2. Sorry, StewMac, I didn't buy a $500 file for this, but yeah, I do have nice files for nut work. I have nice files for fret work. I don't have $300 StewMac files for work. I don't have anything like that. I'm sure their tools are great, but their tools are extremely expensive. And I'm sure they make a lot of stuff, though they also have really cool things that you kind of can only really get from them. But I actually found a place here in America that makes some of the parts I use. This was made in the USA, and it's the best lightweight steel fret checker. And it's, you know, way cheaper than StewMac, but way better than any of the freebie, crappy Chinese ones that aren't very good. They really aren't very good either. They will not check the neck properly when you're going down here to check for, you know, rattle or whatever. As you can see, there's none on this because it's been done. But and the same company I got that from, I got my neck checker. This is made in America. This was not StewMac prices, but this is really great for checking your relief in both scales, in the common Fender scale and the Gibson scale, which the Fender is your 25.5 and Gibson is 24 3/4, a shorter neck scale. So you can use this for either one of those guitars. And this was not expensive, but it was made in the USA, and it's an extremely good tool. So they do have them. You just have to kind of dig around for them and try to find them. If you don't, a lot of times, like you buy a kit, maybe you see a couple things that might work from a cheap Chinese kit, and then it will have one of those fret rockers as a throw-in. And those things, I don't know what's with them, but I can show you side by side a fret rocker that is made in America that's actually really good and inexpensive, and I'll show you where it will detect a rocking motion on your frets better than a Chinese one, which you might not even be able to use. So when they glazed this over with paint, they probably dipped it in paint, really quick. They probably just dunked it in paint and then hung it on some coat hangers or something, and then they let it dry for however long, and the dripping of the paint and everything just kind of blobbed up and globbed up everywhere. And these things are pooped out of a factory at light speed, and very few hands were on them. A lot of machining, and sometimes you'll get a really, really good instrument from those kind of conditions, and sometimes you won't. So because it's hit or miss, and because you really don't know what you're going to get ready to work on them. And people say, oh, well, I want to begin, so I'm going to get a Glarry, so because it's a good beginner guitar, but it's really not. Those are good for modding. They're good for people who know what they're doing. They're good if you plan on working on guitars, and maybe you want to start learning to work on a guitar. I don't know, maybe guitar techs and luthiers and stuff really like Glarrys because they bring in more people with these $100 and $150 guitars, and then they're going to pay another $150, $200, or $300 to get the thing where they can really use it. And that's what you're going to have to do. And in this case, I have to remove this. It was barely detectable before, and now that probably didn't even fix it enough to really open it up. So yeah, with the screws lined up the way they're supposed to be, the back of this is still flush with that wood. So more of this is going to have to come out. But now there's almost none of the paint on the front that's making this not work right. But on the back you can see in here, the paint is just kind of slobby, slapped in there, especially right there. You can see where the spring claw goes in. There's just chips of paint here. This is paint that can be broken right off, and there's going to be some of that wood underneath there. Really fast. They dunk these and then hang them, and then they polish them probably with like a belt-driven wheel pad or something quick. They don't, of course, you're not going to pay $100 or $150 for a guitar that had a person sitting there looking over every little tiny thing, part of it with a fine-tooth comb. That's not going to happen. You have to do that. So again, probably not the best beginner instrument unless you're ready to spend another $100 or $200 getting it ready to play, which you probably should. That's one thing. If somebody says, oh, this $100 guitar isn't good for beginners, why? Because of the condition it came in when I got it. Well, if you buy a $2,000 guitar and you don't know how to work on it, you're going to spend another $100 or $150 getting it set up. And if you buy a $150 guitar and you don't know how to work on it, you're going to spend another $100 or $150 to set it up. So with that circumstance, it is probably okay to go ahead and get one for a beginner, but don't buy one and say, I just spent $150 and then I got the guitar and now I'm ready. Because it's probably not going to happen. You're going to go, why are my fingers getting caught on these frets? Why does it buzz like crazy? Why does it not sound loud? Why will it not stay in tune? And all kinds of stuff like that. Just all kinds of little things are going to pop up like that. Whereas if you buy a $2,000 guitar, it had a lot of hands on it. And those people went over everything with a fine-tooth comb and said, oh, this is right, this is right, this is right. And then they quality controlled it until it was probably worth $1,000. But you're not buying a guitar here and paying for what it's worth, though. You're buying a guitar here and you're paying for the name on it. So someone calculated that you're paying at least $500 just to have Fender stamped on the headstock of a guitar. You're probably paying $1,000 for a Gibson or something like that. So it's not that you can't get a really, really good guitar made from China. You just have to be careful, and you have to be ready for that extra $100 or $150 or $200 or whatever at the guitar tech shop to get it where you might want it to be. And the pickups, though, most people, I don't think they understand that there's a business out there. It's all business selling you a vintage freaking output jack. That doesn't matter. as long as this thing's catching on to your plug-in and it's not rattling or loose, then you can make this work better if it is a little funky. Oh, but my knobs, well, if they turn fast enough for you and they sound okay. Oh, well, the pickups, well, no. Well, there's a thing they say, cheap guitar, expensive amp. And that probably makes sense because the amp has so much power over the sound. You know, the sound that's coming out is going to be that amplification coming through these pickups. If your pickups are truly, really nasty, crappy, which most of them really aren't that bad today, then yeah, maybe you'll need to swap them out or get better ones or something. But I didn't have a problem with the Glarry stock cheap pickups. They're like, I'm pretty sure they'll have Nyko 5 pickups. They're not branded, but they sound good. They're not super loud. But if I upgrade stuff, I'll use Dragonfires. I used some Schecters out of a guitar a couple times. I'll upgrade pickups. I had a pickup break, so I had to replace it, and I replaced it with a pretty good single coil. And it affected the sound of the instrument, yeah, but nothing affects it as much as the quality of the amplifier. It might have a little bit to do with how good your cable is that you use. One of these really cheap, crappy cables these guitars come with, that's probably not going to sound good either. But yeah, I like these stagger pole Wilkinson pickups. They're low end, but I really, really like how they sound. These knobs are okay, but I don't think they're like 500K pots. They're probably dime pots. I haven't taken this off to see, but I think I did shim the neck. I did a total level crown polish on the frets. I did the edges of the frets. I replaced the string trees. It could probably stand to have better tuning machines on it, and that will be a future thing, but this neck isn't going to get the new tuners. The next neck is going to get the new tuners because this guitar is getting a different neck. It's getting a neck that looks like a Fender neck. That's kind of a fake look-alike Fender neck. So yeah, when it's done, this will be back a little bit off here, the wood, and then this will have this nice big fat block bent metal Wilkinson with Wilkinson pickups. So a Wilkinson bridge, Wilkinson pickups, and it will have a Fender look-alike neck. And it should be a much better sounding instrument. I'm going to go ahead and put the rollers from this one, this string roller trees, on the new neck, unless I have new ones in the back, which I might have some new ones left over that could go on. I don't have to take them off this neck. But yeah. So I'm working at bringing back this wood. I'm using a file to bring back the wood, and I'm thinking maybe a couple of millimeters at the very most should be enough to free it up. Trying to be neat about it. But I put an edge in it here. There is a grinding edge on one side, so I can line it up with where I want it and work from there. I can do that on this side. But I went ahead and got in and took off more of that paint on the inside because there's kind of a lot of it for a cheap guitar. I actually found out recently, I picked up a couple of years ago, I think probably 3 years ago now, I picked up a Dean Zone 2, a purple one, and I was looking through my just eBay to see what the current values of some of the instruments were, and I found out there were only like 3 of those left on eBay, and that they were all from Japan, and that they were going upwards of $1,000, and I didn't pay $1,000 for mine. And I was just like, wow, I'm really glad I bought that because it's worth a lot more now than it was. And it is an excellent guitar. I mean, it is extremely good. One of my favorite guitars. It's got a Floyd Rose, of course. It's got some pretty mean, loud, hot pickups. Pretty good hardware. It's an excellent instrument. breaking it back. And whether this is really pretty or not, you know, as function is most important here. Whether it looks good. But of course it's hidden mostly by the flat metal piece here for the bottom of the bridge is completely hiding it. Even up to a couple of millimeters, it's going to completely hide that. So I can try to make it line up nice and clean, but that is not a big deal. The big deal is movement of the bridge. Now, of course, if I screwed that bridge in as it is, it wouldn't have bending strings. It wouldn't have any bending string action at all, which I want. I want the bending string action. So I have to just, but if you didn't care, this would be an effective way to stop that block completely, and you'd make yourself a hardtail that could have no bending of strings and no tremolo action there. But yeah, just working this out, getting into the wood, and there's so much. I can smell the paint. So much. Like putty, filler, plasticky paint and stuff goes into these. They're obviously very rapidly made instruments. The fastest, cheapest methods. And of course, as methods have gotten more mechanical, and we have CNCs and programmable routers, and they have all kinds of tools, it's a lot easier to make these things cheap and fast. So the quality has went up and the cost has went down, and it's made the Chinese guitar market really competitive. And so you have die-hard, you know, American guitar only people who don't even want a Chinese thing in their house at all anywhere. And you know, I don't think Chinese people want crappy guitars. I don't think they're like, oh, let's buy something Chinese made because it's great from China. Oh, that sucks. It's got every varying degree of quality. And for instance, the Mitchell guitars, they were the Guitar Center brand. People complained, and they were supposed to be like pro quality instruments, and they had a lot of quality control issues. But the two Mitchells I got, the HD 400 and the TD 400, are two of the best guitars I've ever played. They are extremely good guitars. Like the green one I got, that's a super shredder, has like extremely awesome frets, and the pickups are really good, and it plays fast, and it's got a Floyd Rose. It's just a good guitar all around. When I got it, it was on the cheap because part of the locking nut had a little tiny chipped out piece of metal on the low E side. So I took a old Ibanez part, essentially identical but better made, and replaced it. No harm, no foul, and now it's all back together. But if you get these cheap, crappy, fake licensed by Floyd Rose, oh boy, those are so terrible. They really are. I'd say a cheap licensed by Floyd Rose bridge is worse than this cheap, flimsy 6-screw, because there are parts of a Floyd Rose bridge where you just need them to be hardened steel, like the nuts especially, that hold down the locking mechanisms, the nuts that loosen the locks on the bridge, and the nuts that loosen the clamps on the nut itself. And one way you can tell if it's cheap is there'll be little ridges. There'll be like little spaces where you can, little tactile feeling spots on those nuts and on the adjustment pins, the bolts there on the back of the Floyd Rose. If they're smooth metal around those, oh boy, get ready for that to suck really bad, really fast. They're going to break, or when you turn and crank them with a wrench, the inside of that cheap nut is going to wear away really fast. They're just painted crappy pop metal the cheapest thing they could possibly make. And those bridges are very, very cheap. The edges, the knife edges on those bridges, they wear out very fast. And they're just a mess. Those are fake. Like if you want to talk about what do they call it? A strat-like object or whatever. Well, there's, in my opinion, there's nothing worse or cheaper than one of those cheap Chinese Floyd Rose that might say license buy on it or something crazy like that, and they're just the cheapest crap that you could possibly get. And they ruin the guitar. It could be a halfway decent body. It could even be a neck that is okay, but if it has that cheap bridge, you need to get the pins out of it, you need to get the bridge off of it, and put, I mean, even a Floyd Rose Special would be better than one of those. So yeah, I mean, pretty much anything you can get that's going to be, that have the hardened metal bolts, and so yeah, as far as the real trick of cheap guitars that are going to suck and ruin your playing experience, if the strat-like objects are not nearly as bad as the licensed by Floyd Rose, fake Floyd Rose tremolos, those are really garbage. And yeah, a lot of the necks are not aged properly. They're not. The wood is cheap. It hasn't been dried properly and stuff. You're just gonna run into as many bad. Oh, that's. Huh. Okay. That looks like it's coming up now. I think that might be okay. We're gonna try it out. Real quick like. So just kind of get an idea of whether this is okay. I think it is. And this whole job I've been using this. I didn't plan on that, but the majority of this job I've been using the Leatherman. I'll put it like this to get a better grip on the back for tightening screws. Like that. And it's just perfect. It's totally fine. These are kind of expensive actually, the PST2s. I looked around for those and it's hard to find them. The newer Leathermen they're made very well, but they don't have as many options or functions. And of course, I probably don't need to tell you this, but they were made with the idea of a leather worker all-purpose tool in mind. The scissors are like surgical grade, super sharp, so they can cut through leather. The punch on them is really sharp, and it can round and it can punch into leather. That's what the purpose of it. But of course, I'm not a leather worker, but her dad actually was a leather worker. So it's kind of cute that her leather worker dad gave me a Leatherman. And there we go. It's got still catching a little. I can feel it, and it's actually at the edge of this side, just the tiniest bit. So I'm going to get in there and do a little bit more work to get that leveled out. But yeah, I wouldn't. Maybe if a carpenter came into my house and then was, oh, I'm going to use this Leatherman for everything, I would. And that's what Bidhead 1000 was saying, is if, a guy comes to your house to do work for you and he pulls out a Leatherman, just kick him right out of the house. But for fine work, the file on this thing is exceptional. The everything on it actually is really, really good. Screwdriver is even really super good. The knife's really sharp. Even the bottle opener's really good. This file I've used a massive amount. It hasn't lost any of its grit or its graininess. I've used this for so many. I used it virtually like every other day at least for the 20 years that I've had the thing, and it just doesn't ever mess up or give in or anything. It's got so many purposes. So yeah, I couldn't agree with what he's saying, that you can't use these or that they're crap or whatever. Now there are cheap ones, and they have like cheap whatever gas station multi-tools that you'll just pinch your hand with, or they'll suck. And of course, you don't want to use those. I wouldn't trust working with wood on anything. There's something you give your kid just to play around with, or hopefully they're old enough to have a little fake bendy crappy metal knife in there, but I probably wouldn't even do that. Of course, when I was a little kid, we had survival knives. Like, you'd go to one of the town fair kind of things going on, and they have lots of cheap stuff you could buy, and you beg your mom for a Rambo survival knife with a compass and a little bag in it with fish hooks and matches and stuff like that. And we would use the little whetstone on it to sharpen the knife, and we'd go walking around with it on our belt, and we were Rambo because we had a survival knife, and they were crap. But you could have fun with them. It wasn't like something you could really use for much, maybe. Well, maybe you could. You're not catching fish with it, I don't think. It had a great compass, though. I remember the compasses on all of them were these, like this big around, and they were on the handle. And the compass was work. So you could use that compass, and we did. We'd go out and walk around and, just pointing this way and stuff. We'd have fun with those survival knives. But today you got to be real careful. So yeah, I probably wouldn't give a little kid even a fake multi-tool, crappy multi-tool that they sell at like Walmart for $20 or something. They'll just try to cut something, and that cheap, crappy knife will snap on them or something, or they'll try to use it for something and it won't work. So yeah, I'm going to do more of this and then come back with that installed, and then we're going to put the neck on it. Alright, after considerably more filing, I think I'm there. I'm going to test this out. But, yeah, not long ago, I got a package in the mail in my name, which I always have stuff that's for me sent in my name, but for the most part, mail that comes to my house is for my wife or my kids. But I didn't order a package, but I got one. And it said it was from, I don't know, maybe, I don't remember, China or something. It was somewhere. I wrote it down. I wrote it down in a little book because this was just weird. Someone sent me this, like, a torch lighter. I didn't order a torch lighter. I didn't buy a torch lighter. I wasn't looking for one or whatever. But someone sent me this in the mail, and it also has the little mini pin thing on the end, and it also has a what is this? A built-in a built-in torch, which you can see there. Which it's cool. It works great. It took a little bit to get it started. It didn't want to, but I figured out, oh, you have to adjust this or that or the other to get the inner workings just right. And then after that, it worked perfectly. But yeah, someone was like, hey, I'm going to send that guy. And I don't know why. I don't know if it was like some scam or something. I really don't even know. I mean, I don't have a bank account in my name, so they're not scamming my bank account that I don't have. They're not, I mean, who would just send me a lighter for no reason? Like, oh, maybe that guy would like, let's see, there we go. That's a lot of action there. I'll probably go in and do more work later to, just to thin it up in the back. Because that seems like I might have a little bit of catch, but probably not. Once the springs are on it, then it's going to be there. That's a lot of room. So if I go about there, I could go up or down, I guess. We'll see. So that's seated in there. Okay. How It looks like maybe this guy. There's a little crooked. And this game looks like somebody intonated the bridge before packaging it, which, I don't know, sometimes I've seen that. I've seen a bridge come out of the package and it's got, you know, like this. Some are out front, some are a little stanced, a little crooked. So that's intonation. This is moved forwards or backwards to get rid of flatness or sharpness on the second octave. So if you don't know, a guitar is at least one, but sometimes two octaves on your neck. So if you look at your neck on your first fret, you got your 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, 9th fret, and then the 12th fret is the beginning of the second octave on a neck. So on a guitar like this that is 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 frets, that means it is 2 frets shy of a 2 octave neck. So super shredder guitars that say 24 frets, those are 2 whole octave necks. But when you do stuff up here, of course the open strings are still low, but anything you're hitting up there beyond this 12th fret is just 1 octave higher than what it would be from the nut. So, so when you intonate a guitar, you want to make sure that the 12th fret are all the same notes as the open strings. So you'll hit this, but this will be E, but it will be 1 octave higher. You'll get A 1 octave higher, D 1 octave higher, G 1 octave higher, B 1 octave higher, and then high E again 1 octave higher. But then you can test your harmonic on that 12th fret, and so the fretted string should be 1 octave higher, and the harmonic string should also be that same 1 octave. And if it's not, it will be either sharp or flat, and then you will adjust these forwards or backwards to get rid of the sharpness or flatness of that string. And then if the string, maybe it's a little too high up, like the fat E might be a little too high up, so somebody lowered this little riser screw thing here to bring the fat E a little bit closer to the center of the neck. And maybe like what it looks like here is the high E might have been a little too high up on the neck, so they did that to bring it down. But this is all going to be adjusted to fit the neck that I put on this guitar. And so that's going to be the next step, of course, after I put the claw and the new springs on this. And I'll probably go ahead and solder this to ground it so that the whole entire thing's done. But you can see there's a lot more space there now inside there for that to move around. And that's what you want. You don't want it hitting stuff, of course, when it's in there. So I can get my claw. This claw, it lines up with the screws pretty good, but it's awfully wide. And then with the springs lined up, the springs might brush up against the edge of the cavity. So I might go ahead and use the old claw that was in it, and of course that weight maybe makes me waste the whole act of cutting the ground. I could have just left the ground on there, but then this will give room for the spring, which will reach from here up to this guy right here, depending on how you're doing it. I often find that I just like 2 springs because I like my action to be nice and easy to fluctuate the notes. I want to be able to raise and lower my notes very easily. So, but some people, you know, and this also depends on a lot of factors. It depends on the string tension. It depends on, so you're using 12s, or if you're like Stevie Ray Vaughan or something, and you're using, power power lines for strings or something, then maybe this guy needs 5 springs to even keep it in tune or to be intonated. But I usually use 2 springs if I can get away with it, 3 at the most. But I learned just recently, someone pointed out, a person I have a lot of respect for, luthier. I've watched dozens of luthiers, and I've learned an incredible amount of working on guitars by watching a ton of luthiers. One of them said, hey, look how this guy's got a spring here, and he's got a spring here, but look, he's got one in the middle. He said, this is like a law of physics here. This middle one isn't doing anything. And then he pulled it out, and it didn't change the bridge at all. So you don't want to waste the spring, but also when you finally actually do pull on it to get that action, you are pulling on 3 springs, so there is going to be more tension from that middle spring as it's being engaged and stretched out. I don't want that. I want as little tension as I can get away with and still have the guitar in tune and be able to have stable tuning. So I don't want 3 springs if I can have 2. And 2 of them is what I usually try to do. Some guitars, I can't do that. Like I'll put the springs in and my claw will be too close to the cavity edge with 2. And so I'll put a 3rd one on, and then I'll be able to bring my claw away from it and then achieve proper intonation and string tension. But I'll still need those 3 springs, and then when I pull, it's going to take a little bit more strength, and it's a little edgier, a little harder to deal with. But that's just the nature of the beast on that in that situation. But maybe I can get some higher tension springs to then allow myself to only use 2, and then that might help bridge that gap in tension where I would need 3 lower tension springs. So yeah, there are ways around it. But yeah, of course, when I'm playing it, I want to be able to do bends. Do you want to have to really hulk out and really yank on that? You got your whammy bar and you're like trying to get this. No, I want to grab it. I want to be able to just barely tap it if I want and get some if I can, or grab it and really control a lot. So I don't want a lot of spring tension back here. I want exactly how much I need to keep the guitar in tune, but not too much to where I have 3 or 4 or 5 springs back there. And I always use 10s. I'll just say that right out. I've played for 30 years, a little more than 30 years now, and I started on 8s and 9s, and I broke strings constantly. And eventually I said, okay, I'm done, because I'll break a string and I don't have $10 or whatever to go get just 1 pack of strings. And so that would be the end of my playing for a while, at least if I'm, depending on what string it is. If it's, if it's going to be the low E, and if it's a hardtail, sure, I can still keep it in tune and I can play. But no, it's not realistic for me now that I play all the strings all the time. I want all the strings on there all the time when I'm working, when I'm playing and stuff. So I started using 10s, and I tried all kinds of different brands of 10s, and I ended up just settling on GHS boomers, which are my favorite strings by far. I guess the GHS strings were designed for the Pink Floyd project, Pink Floyd The Wall project, and they're made in the USA. They're extremely good. They sound great. They're my favorite strings because you can get like a 12-pack of ththose strings for not little money. It might be 50 or 60 bucks or something, but you'll get 12 packs of strings. You're not going to run out of strings. Or they'll give you a 5-pack for like 30 bucks, but they'll throw in a 6-pack for free, and they come in a bag. So you're not going to run out of strings. You'll always have good strings. And I use 10s. I use 10, 13, 17, 26, 36, 46 strings pretty much all the time. I've used some progressive strings that were Dave Mustaine Signature Edition progressives, and I liked how they sounded. They are great strings, but they're kind of expensive. I also like DR strings a lot. They're more expensive, but the DRs that I've used have always been exceptional strings. They always sound really, really good, stay in tune good, and all that stuff. So yeah, I have my things that I like, and honestly, I'm not into other strings other than, I've noticed that people love D'Addario, and I've also noticed that most guitars that you buy from a guitar store come with D'Addarios on them. D'Addario, however you want to pronounce it. D'Addario. I've always called them D'Addarios. I've always heard them called D'Addarios. I don't give a crap. They're all right. They're pretty good strings. They're expensive. And so I don't rely on them. I don't get Ernie balls. They're usually too expensive, and I haven't seen that they are better than the GHS boomers that I use. So for the most part, I use GHS boomers. I also like the multicolored neon DR strings that sound amazing. They're just like, and they are neon. They glow in the light. They really bling bright, and they look and sound exceptional. You might have some chip away though on the colorings. They might not work well on a locking tremolo where you have it locked in, and that little filling color stuff that's on the outside will let the string be more likely to give way. So yeah, DR and GHS are my two brands that I recommend. You're not going to pay too much. You'll have a whole bunch of strings to use, and why pay too much if you don't have to? That's there.